Good morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We are so glad to have you with us. It is one of our favorite weeks of the year. It is Georgia, Florida, lousy, stinking Gators heading down to Jacksonville. Some of you are already there, by the way, or at least those beautiful coastal locales around the Jacksonville area. And if you are, I'm jealous. I'm proud of you. I'm ready to see us all enjoy a great one here over the course of the next few days. We'll celebrate some folks who are already enjoying all of that. You know, it's very important. When it comes to being a Georgia fan, it's not just a better team, it's also a better life in many cases, too. And Georgia fans enjoyed the best of all of this. And in addition to all of that, we're going to get serious with some football stuff today, too, because I think there's a couple of pieces of evidence from the NFL weekend that one of the things that we've talked a lot about coming off of the game against Texas and really all season long for Georgia, significant challenge for this Georgia offense, perhaps still a work in progress. The NFL weekend, I think, gives us more evidence of just how significant that challenge actually is. We'll tell you more about that coming up in a moment. Also, interesting recruiting news. Georgia gets a commit. There was a decommit of note from a Georgia target. And a Georgia commit also kind of out visiting other places here, too. So we'll cover a lot of ground with recruiting. Jon Stinchcomb going to stop by. The SEC championship race got a lot more interesting after one particular result on Saturday. And a coach that I don't think had a whole lot of fame and notoriety prior to this weekend has probably now become a little bit more of a central figure in the ongoing soap opera that is the SEC. We'll cover that. I think we have a really fun new contest we're going to tell you about. We got a lot of ground to cover, and we're so happy to have you with us. Rolling it into the cocktail party week here, and excited about it all. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
There is a subject that we have talked a lot about, to the point of, like, what is the phrase? People say ad nauseum. We are probably like ad nauseum, levels here on the topic of what Georgia had to replace to begin this season offensively. And I do believe that when it comes to so-and-so returning starters or who's not here anymore, at a certain point in time, we're all the way almost in November here. The Georgia team is, what it was in 2023 or what it was in the national championship seasons of 2021 and 2022. All of that is kind of behind us now. We are in the midst of the 2024 season now. And so, for better or for worse, the team that we're seeing on the field is what Georgia is. But going into this upcoming weekend, and y'all, we all understand how big this is. Man, I love it. I've been getting these messages all weekend long. We're going to show you some of these a little bit later on, and we're going to be really enjoying it all week long. That Georgia fans are so ready for this cocktail party against Florida, so ready to kind of beat up again on the lousy, stinking Gators. We know the importance of this historically, what the rivalry's always meant, the start of another big stretch run for Georgia through the month of November. We are so locked in on everything that's about to happen for Georgia. And in light of that, for the need for Georgia to beat its best so you can beat a hated rival and then all the teams you're going to play after that, revisiting this topic one more time, especially in light of some of the things that maybe you saw unfold in the football world this weekend, maybe this is an important thing to go back and do at least one more time. For instance, if you go back to the last time Georgia played a game 2 Saturdays ago, 2 Saturdays ago, when it's beating the then number one team in the country, Texas, Carson Beck threw 3 interceptions. And that is obviously a piece of evidence in what has been an ongoing saga of the Georgia offense, trying to figure out, what it is here in 2024 and how it kind of achieves some of the same level of success that it had in its national championship season, or even last year when it was averaging about 40 points per game. How do you get back to that point? Well, in the midst of, Kirby Smart talking about interceptions a couple of weeks ago, he also talked about one more time, when you look around at this Georgia offense, it is undeniable that this Georgia offense is missing a couple of very important pieces that really made this unit hum for much of the last 3 years, certainly the last couple of years. This is Kirby Smart. You know, he's asked about the Carson Beck interceptions after Texas, and he kind of pivots to, man, this is still a work in progress, figuring out how you play without guys like Brock Bowers, how you play without guys like Ladd McConkey. This is what he said at the time.
No, I don't think so. He had an errant throw. The guy made a great play on. He had the controversial play. And then I don't remember the other one. I'm sure it was number 7. I guess he had 3, right? I can't remember the other one, what it was, but I don't think he's doing anything different. We don't have some of the same guys. You know what I mean? He's carrying a lot of that burden with it. I think the offensive line played really good. I thought we ran the ball well. He had a lot of drops that maybe without the drops, we don't have as many interceptions.
So Kirby Smart saying there, hey, when you try to figure out what this Georgia team is offensively, getting into the rhythm you want them to be in, once again, Smart says we don't have some of the same guys. And at a certain point, as I kind of alluded to begin the show, maybe you feel like, boy, that topic's been talked about enough. That's now a little bit tired of not having Brock Bowers, not having Ladd McConkey. But honestly, when you kind of see like an NFL weekend that was here this past weekend, I just think it so greatly reinforces just how actually special guys like Brock and Ladd were, and perhaps just how significant the challenge really is to go out there and try to replace them and go out there and be the same level of offense with guys like this not playing. And I just think that the NFL weekend just provides such a big reminder of just how significant that challenge is. Did you see this with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Las Vegas Raiders yesterday? I'll show you this on the screen here. The NFL did a great job of sharing this, of Travis Kelce meeting with Brock Bowers after the game. Now, I've got the audio I'm going to play for you on this. Kaylee Manziel says I shouldn't play the audio because it's not good enough. She's probably right. I'm going to play it anyway just to prove that it happened. Travis Kelce essentially saying that he's happy for Brock Bowers and that he's going to send his jersey to Brock Bowers' locker. He even gives you a go Dogs here. Obviously, even Travis Kelce knows that Brock Bowers, the former Dog. So it's not great audio. Kaylee is right about that. But let's play it anyway in honor of what was yesterday National Tight Ends Day. Kelsey's showing some love for Brock Bowers.
Absolute animal, man. Happy as hell for you. Keep doing your thing, man. Yo, I'm going to see my jersey here on locker room. We got to get one for tight end. Let's go with the Bulldogs.
Truly terrible audio. Kaylee's right about that. But you got the Georgia Bulldogs there at the end. It's proof that it happened. And listen, I mean, Kelce last year, he was one of the most famous people on the planet, obviously for his relationship with Taylor Swift. And you got this guy showing love to Brock Bowers, sending his jersey to the locker room, and they're doing a little bit of a jersey swap there. It's National Tight Ends Day, obviously recognizing Bowers as sort of the next big thing as an NFL tight end. And so when a guy like that, who's getting this much love in his first NFL season, when a guy like that's getting praised in that manner, then yeah, it is a pretty significant challenge having to replace him in a place like Georgia. It is. And not to be outdone by that, the stuff that Ladd McConkey's doing, remarkable rookie season for the Los Angeles Chargers. He finds the end zone a couple of times yesterday. And then after the game, in like the most, these guys give such a valuable commercial to Georgia every time they talk. Travis Kelce showing love to the Georgia Bulldogs. But Ladd McConkey saying all the exact right things after another successful day for him in his rookie season, showing some love to the way in which Georgia prepared him for that moment. Once again, you're reminded that not only is McConkey a very good player, but also a really special dude as well. This was McConkey after another big day for the Chargers yesterday.
I feel like it's definitely been a transition. I don't want to say effortless, but I feel like Coach Smart and everybody at Georgia kind of prepared me for this. We practice hard at Georgia. We take game reps at practice, so now it's just transitioning over here and continuing that, but taking it to another notch. So that's kind of what it is. There's good days, there's bad days that y'all see, y'all don't see. So yeah, just stacking days and then coming out and put it on tape on Sundays.
First of all, what McConkey says at the end there, and I don't want to be a blowhard, but I can't help but think about some of this kind of stuff. What McConkey says at the end there about stacking good days, like there is so much wisdom kind of contained within that of if you want to improve at anything in life or be the best you can be at anything in life, part of the success formula is just how many good days in a row can you stack of, what is it, Kirby says, attack the day, or, whatever that is. Like, how many good days in a row can you stack? And if you do enough, then obviously you're going to see some major changes in your life for the better. In this case, for Ladd McConkey, he says, hey, stacking one good day after another, the way that I did at Georgia, is now helping me be a very successful NFL rookie wide receiver. And my gosh, what a commercial. And how many opportunities would Georgia have to sort of showcase that to future recruits or current players of, look at this guy succeeding in the NFL, being where you want to be, and pointing back to his time at Georgia. We asked him to work hard. We asked him to practice hard, foregoing some glory sometimes along the way, but paying off in a big way right now. I mean, how much do you love that if you're a Georgia fan? Ladd McConkey continuing to show a lot of respect for Kirby Smart, a lot of love for UGA. That's amazing. But it also comes back to what we were saying a moment ago. Ladd's no longer here. That special level of player, Georgia's looking for its next Ladd McConkey. Brock Bowers is no longer here. I've called him one of the 4 best players in Georgia program history. There's, of course, going to be a void when a guy like that is no longer around. And Georgia is trying to figure out what life looks like without these guys right now. So the question we sort of spin it forward now is, what do you do about that? Especially in light of a game in which, if you're like me, and so many of you are, you want Georgia to play well against these lousy, stinking Gators on Saturday. You want another rivalry win, and then you want all the wins that come after that. And you sort of have the belief, and you're probably right, that you got to be far better offensively to really give yourself the best chance to do that. And so if Kirby Smart is still, after all of that, talking about no longer having a Brock Bowers, no longer having a Ladd McConkey, and if we're seeing on NFL Sundays, because of the praise of Travis Kelce and the attention of the world, how good, the Bowers and McConkey guys, really are, like, how do you find that next gear offensively without them? I think that becomes a really important question. And I think it puts, fairly or not, a lot of the weight on the shoulders of one guy, and that's Carson Beck. Every year Kirby tells us that teams kind of reinvent themselves, and every team is a little bit different. And to sort of expect this team to have a next Ladd McConkey or a next Brock Bowers was perhaps unfair from the start. But that doesn't mean this team can't still find its success offensively. I just think down the stretch, it's probably going to have to lean a lot more on its quarterback in order to get that done. And one of the things that makes me feel that way, let's go back to something else that Kirby Smart said last week. This is a clip we played for you last week. But, in the midst of talking about all the drops that Georgia's having from the current crop of pass catchers, guys not named Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers, Kirby Smart talked about the fact that they want to have a lot of confidence in these pass-catching targets, be them tight ends or wide receivers. And they want those guys, the pass-catching threats for UGA, to have confidence in themselves. And in the midst of doing that, Kirby Smart said some interesting things about Carson Beck, kind of calling Beck like the real weapon for this offense here right now. Well, if that's the case, then it might be time to unleash that weapon fully and completely against Florida and everybody else that Georgia's about to play. In fact, let me let you hear this. Kirby talking about the struggles at times of the guys now kind of trying to fill the void left behind by Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers' departure. And listen to the way in which, in speaking about all of this, Kirby kind of pivots to Beck in that discussion. This was from last week. You heard it then, but let's hear it now with some additional context. Kirby Smart talking about all of this topic.
I think you have to be careful. You have to ask yourself why. You go through them, watch them, you try to analyze it, and you want to create confidence. You want to create an environment of learning and teaching. And, I thought Coley did a good job talking to him and explaining to him that I think we're second in the SEC in passes per game. So we must have hellified confidence in them if we're second in passing attempts per game in the league. So we do have tremendous confidence in them, the backs and the tight ends, and we're going to continue to do that. I don't think you can be a good football team if you can't throw and catch the ball. And we have a guy that's a weapon. There's a lot of teams out there in the country that wish they had a quarterback that could put them in the right play and has the ability to fix the protection and has the ability to get the ball to the right guy efficiently. So I know a lot of receivers want to play with a guy like that.
So let's sum all this up this way. Last year, Ladd McConkey may have been the weapon for Georgia. In 2022, in a national championship season, he may have been a weapon for Georgia. Brock Bowers was certainly a weapon, unlike almost anything this program's ever had before. But in 2024, in so many ways, in so many words, what Kirby Smart says there is Carson Beck needs to be our weapon. And if you want to judge Beck over the course of the next few games of what I think we assume will be the final year for him in a Georgia football uniform, let's look to see this. You can't make a Ladd McConkey from nothing, and you can't make a Brock Bowers from nothing, but can you make somebody that's on the receiving end of your passes? Can you do something to make one of those guys into a star? Can you raise the level of the offensive performers around you? That's going to be, I think, one of the ways in which we judge Carson Beck in the remainder of this season. And I still have a lot of high hopes, a lot of optimism that that's exactly what will happen. And that Beck, over the course of a month of November, heading into what we hope is a college football playoff appearance and then maybe a chance at a national championship after that, demonstrates how much of a real offense, to use Kirby Smart's word, offensive weapon that he really is, and that he can raise the entire fortunes of the Georgia offense in the process. And as we talked about some last week, we even talked about some of this with Jake Fromm, the game against Florida is such a perfect time for that to happen. For whatever reason, this has just been a spot in which Georgia quarterbacks have kind of played at their best at times in the past. Jake Fromm was an example of that. Carson last year made a very big point about wanting to play well against his, sort of home state team in his hometown area of Jacksonville. You got to imagine some of those feelings still linger for him too. And there is still an awful lot of time left for Beck to really write his own story for this 2024 season. When you look around at how wide open the race is, even for as crazy as it sort of sounds, even for the Heisman Trophy, it is still a wide open race for all of that right now. Anything that was kind of thought to be a possible preseason expectation for Beck before this year began, all of that could still come true. But he's got to be the weapon that Kirby Smart just described him as. And he's got to raise the fortunes for all the pass-catching targets that are on the receiving end of his throws. There is no doubt. You see Brock Bowers thriving at the NFL level right now. You see Ladd McConkey thriving at the NFL level right now. This past weekend, more evidence of that. When guys that good are no longer in your team, you're going to miss them. You're going to notice their absence. But Carson Beck has a chance to also kind of put his name in the history books for Georgia football, the same way that McConkey and Bowers once did, by raising the level of the guys around him in this UGA offense. And coming up this Saturday against Florida, that feels like an awfully good time for all of that to start happening. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Don't know where that came from. Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Glad to have them as a part of our program today. And I tell you, energy-efficient windows and doors, man, Pella Window and Door of Georgia is so good at all of that. Our homes matter to us, and it sort of feels like, especially when you kind of, you see the transition to fall, you look out the windows, you see the pretty foliage and all that kind of stuff, and you're just reminded, it's great to live in a comfortable home. And one of the things that our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia do for us is make those homes more comfortable, make you feel better on the inside, because the energy that you pay so much for, their bills get higher and higher and higher. Finding a way to kind of save yourself some money and all of that is always a really important thing. And so when you have the energy efficient windows and the energy efficient windows and doors that Pella Window and Door of Georgia is famous for, that can save you money on those energy bills, because you're keeping that energy on the inside of your house. That means in the warm weather time of year, the air conditioning, right? It's not creeping out the seal or the crevice of poorly, fitted windows or doors. It's staying on the inside of the house where it's supposed to be. And as eventually we got to have some cold weather, you got to imagine it's going to get here eventually. As eventually that takes place, well, obviously keeping that heat on the inside of your house, that's an important thing too. But the best way to be a great neighbor, the best way to be a sort of a wise steward of your most important asset, is to have that good-looking curb appeal, and that's what the windows and doors of Pella Window and Door of Georgia provide for you too, which can, in the long run, increase your curb appeal and your resale value too. So a lot of important reasons for you right now. If it's time to upgrade, it's time to have a conversation with one of those Pella experts about how you can install Pella windows and doors into your home. And it's a no-pressure consultation. When you talk to one of the Pella experts, they're not trying to push you into something. They're trying to pull you along and really, bring you into a relationship with them and educate you on why Pella Window and Door of Georgia truly is viewed to be the best. Also, Great savings opportunities, too. Between now and October 31st, you can get 10% off a Pella project or no interest if paid in full within 12 months. So they're offering you great financing options, great savings, and that means it's a great time to have a conversation with Pella Window and Door of Georgia today. I want you to reach out to them. Give them a call, 678-638-1429. That's 678-638-1429. Or check out what is really kind of a new website we've been telling you about lately. Make a note of this if you've been listening to us for a long time. It's PellaGA.com/DawgNation. Just got to tighten it up a little bit. PellaGA.com/DawgNation. Please reach out and find out more of that today. Great stuff going on. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. We're going to get Jon Stinchcomb here coming up in a moment. Always love having Jon as a part of our program. But prior to that, I want to go around the doghouse, poured by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And by the way, we had a great time with Jonathan Warren the other night, our buddy from Dr. Pepper. He was with us for our 2024 Chick-fil-A Dog Bowl, bowling a part of our DawgNation team there. Had a great bowling performance, really good job. Great to see him out there doing such a good thing. And I'm just telling you right now, our friends from Dr. Pepper, you know how much I love it. You know how much I love them. Always so tied into everything that's going on with college football, including helping us raise some money for a great cause the other night. That was so much fun to be able to see. And as we're around the doghouse here today, I want to bounce through a couple of recruiting notes here. Let me start with this. Georgia got good news here this weekend. Now, I do think that we're in kind of a bad run lately of recruits making their commitment decisions on the weekends. And listen, I love it when they do that. I think that's great. I do think, though, that sometimes they probably get a little less attention for some of these commitment announcements than if they were to make them at a slightly different time. If I'm just being honest, buried by the football weekend, even when Georgia's not playing, sometimes you maybe don't get quite as much attention as you otherwise would get. But either way, we're really happy for Anthony Crua from Marietta. I'll put this on the screen here. Crua committing to Georgia after having been a UNC commit, now coming to UGA. So this is a true flip here. And Crua telling On3 that he gives God the glory. He's flipping the script, staying home. Go Dogs. And listen, I have liked the Marietta program for a long time. There's a lot to like about Crua. A lot of folks will tell you a lot of very good things about him. 6'2", 215 pounds. So this is one where, listen, when Glenn Schumann gets his eyes on somebody, eventually, oftentimes, more often than not, he seems to get his man. And in this case, Anthony Crua, A.J. Crua, certainly has a very, very bright future here at UGA as a part of this 2025 class. That is very exciting news. Now, to add to that, there's also some intrigue here about a Georgia target that we've spoken about quite a bit. C.J. Wiley, if you want to go back several months ago, we had his commitment announcement right here on the airwaves. I think that day probably thought it was going to be Georgia. It was perhaps surprisingly Florida State at the time. We were also thinking, well, if it's not Georgia or Florida State, then LSU is sort of the other program that's had a little bit of discussion here. But Wiley this weekend visited Texas A&M. And all of a sudden, on the heels of that visit to Texas A&M, Wiley putting it out here now that he is decommitting from Florida State. They're calling him the top uncommitted receiver in the class of 2025 now. And the circumstantial evidence here would suggest that when a decommitment like this happens on the heels of a visit, that the decision around this decommitment may have as much to do with Texas A&M as it has to do with anything. And by the way, Texas A&M also won the commitment of the 2026 wide receiver from Atlanta area, Aaron Gregory, Douglas County here this week. So A&M's out there making a big push in recruiting, and now Wiley, fresh off a visit to A&M, well, now he's, decommitting from Florida State. So what does this mean for Georgia's pursuit of Wiley? And the truth is, I guess I don't know, but all of a sudden now, in a weird way, the race for Wiley, if you're Georgia and you want to try to get in on this, it actually seems a little bit more difficult now because other, major program and perhaps a big spender has entered the chat here, so to speak. So Wiley decommits. At one point in time, we would have viewed that as great news, especially in light of the fact that CJ recently took a visit to Georgia for a game. But in this particular case, it's the timing of this, the visit coming fresh off an appearance at Texas A&M. You have to wonder, well, does Georgia benefit from this if all of this is so closely tied to that visit to College Station? I think this is a player that Georgia would really like to have. This obviously remains one very much worth watching but a little more complicated now than perhaps it was as recently as a week or two ago. But wanted to make you aware of that. C.J. Wiley decommitting from Florida State, but perhaps showing a little bit more interest in a relatively new entrant into the discussion, Texas A&M. And then there's this. We talked to Jeff Sintel on Friday about the Georgia defensive back commit Shamari Earls having a planned visit to Michigan. That Michigan visit did take place. We'll show you photographic evidence here of that. Earl saying that he appreciated the Wolverines fans who showed him hospitality, saying he had a blast there. You know, obviously, this is a Michigan team that doesn't have nearly as much to sell now as it did when it was on its way to winning a national championship here in 2024. But at the same time, they have, certainly seemed to, put a strong push out to, out to Earls here. I guess you do take it as some, good news that, the visit happened, but unlike, say, Wiley we just talked about, there's no decommitment from Georgia here. There's nothing like that on the record as of yet, although I do think if you're a Georgia fan, you got to take the Michigan pursuit here pretty seriously. This is clearly a recruiting battle that Georgia would like to win. Michigan, kind of certainly pushing itself into the conversation right now. So that is one of those that will follow. Georgia trying to, in some cases, like it did with A.J. Crua, win with committed elsewhere recruits, but also at the same time trying to hold on to its recruits. And in the midst of all this, too, as Kirby Smart talked about on Friday when he was doing the Atlanta radio interview on 92.9 The Game, around all of this right now, you've got the situation where they don't even know how many guys they're going to be allowed to sign. Like, literally, they don't know right now if it's an 85 scholarship limit or a 105 scholarship limit. And if it's 105 scholarships, then the Georgia recruiting board looks a lot different if you're still working on an 85 number. This is such a strange time to be a college coach. It really is. And, for the average person doesn't feel sorry for these guys because they make, $8 gazillion a year. But that doesn't make the nature of the work any less challenging. This chaos that's been kind of imposed on these college coaches in many respects, so much so that you see, the in basketball, the Tony Bennett's and you go back throughout the years, these coaches that sort of stepped away and just said that I've had enough of this. It is a challenging time to be a coach. And, Georgia right in the middle of all this, trying to figure out how many guys they're even going to be allowed to sign. But obviously, whatever the number is, Georgia's pushing for the best class can possibly get. And a couple of very interesting recruiting notes coming off the weekend. A commit from a player that Georgia really wants. A decommit from a player that Georgia would also like to have, maybe in kind of a more crowded battle with. Also working hard to hold on to one of their own here, too. So a lot happening for Georgia recruiting. And that is around the doghouse. It's poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. Now, when we talk about our friends at Dr. Pepper, you know how much I love all of them. The great, rich, one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper. For me, it's the Diet Dr. Pepper. It's my favorite version. I like Dr. Pepper Zero Sugar. But there's also these really cool specialty flavors that are out there. The Dr. Pepper Strawberries and Cream, how much do people love that? People have been enjoying, going back to the summer, the Creamy Coconut. That was a fun, big part of everybody's summer. So many great ways to enjoy the great flavor of Dr. Pepper. And as we said before, you're watching football, college football, Dr. Pepper, a huge part of that. Our buddy Jonathan was with us this past week with Coach Rick for the bowling event. They are just right in the middle of all of that. So when you're right in the middle of your own football weekend, make Dr. Pepper a part of it. Stop by your local Kroger, wherever you're doing your shopping, and get yourself some Dr. Pepper. Because when it comes to Dr. Pepper and college football, it's a Pepper thing. And we're glad to have Dr. Pepper pouring around the doghouse for us here today. All right, we got a lot to do. Georgia got a big game coming up against Florida. It is a gigantic week for us around here. We'll cover that and so much more as we welcome in Jon Stinchcomb, the former Georgia All-American, here today to DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Let us say hello to Jon Stinchcomb here, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Always happy to have Jon a part of the program. And, Jon, there's a lot I want to talk to you about what's happening with Georgia here right now. But let me kind of go back to something I was discussing a little earlier. I think that I'm just not that big of an NFL fan. I just can't pretend to be. I do try to watch the league when I'm at home, when I can. But a lot of weekends on Sundays, I'm not at home because I'm, just whatever's going on. You just don't have a chance to do a lot of that. But I love seeing the success that former Dogs have. And, yesterday an example of that. Brock Bowers getting love from Travis Kelce, Ladd McConkey, being highlighted after another kind of multi-touchdown performance for him. He's having a great, rookie season, showing a lot of love to Georgia in his post-game interview about that. I mean, I think that you are reminded on weekends like this how special former players like that are, and just how great it has been in recent years to see Georgia producing that kind of talent and putting guys like that into the NFL, right?
I love it. And it's fun because, you kind of lose track of some guys, and then you flip on the TV, and on Sunday you're going, hey, there's yet another Georgia representative making plays in the NFL. So, with as many players as Georgia puts out in the NFL, it's fun. You can turn on just about any game, and you're going to watch some dogs that are making plays. And, you just mentioned two rookies that made a huge impact at Georgia, and not surprisingly are making big impacts on their teams. I mean, Raiders aren't very good this year, but yet Brock Bowers continues to be that shining star that we thought he would be. And then, you look at the Chargers, and the same thing holds true for Ladd. And they're not alone. I mean, early reports out of Houston with Kamari Lassiter and Ty Key, and just really across the board, there's guys that are making plays and an early impact. And you just mentioned recruiting when you're going around the doghouse, and what a great recruiting tool that is. And in the era of NIL and money and transfer portal, one of the best recruiters remains to be a program that can develop skill that can make you a professional athlete. And I think that's what Georgia puts at the forefront when you look at the number of players that they've been able to, one, recruit at a high level, but develop, and guys that came in really good and leave even better. And that's one of the hallmarks of Georgia's program right now.
And, when you see Bowers having the success that he's having, Ladd McConkey having the success that he's having, it becomes a lot easier to understand why their absence at Georgia here this year is still being talked about so much, including Kirby Smart as recently as 2 Saturdays ago after beating Texas, that as the Georgia offense tries to reinvent itself, at least to an extent, in their kind of after their departure, that there are seemingly some growing pains around that, because the guys like this were truly special players, and it does seem like Georgia's having maybe a little bit of difficulty right now figuring out, okay, what is the next version of that, and how do you find dependable pass catchers that can at least replicate some of the success that guys like that had here at UGA, right?
Yes, and Ladd and Brock specifically, they're special. I mean, they are the talent that they possess made everyone better last year offensively, Carson Beck included. And this year we've seen a number of drops and miscommunications, and whether it's a wrong route on in the secondary, and you're going, was that on the receiver? Was that on the quarterback? There hasn't been the synergy that gets created when you have special talent. And I don't think we need a Ladd or a Brock. Obviously, that would be great if you had them, if we had somebody step up into that role. But we do need the dependability that hasn't been there this year, in both from the receiving core and the quarterback position. So there's a disconnect that's happening. And Georgia's still a high-level, high-performing team, but there's even more. The ceiling is higher than what we've seen so far. And, you're 2/3 of the way through the regular season, and you're going, man, I'm hoping for more. I'm hoping that this aerial attack can continue to gain ground, and that's why you're grateful for a bye week and more time for them to get on the same page. There's a number of guys, when we talked about it preseason, you're saying, hey, this wide receiver room looks pretty diverse in their talent and what they bring to the table. Guys with speed, guys with good route running, guys that like Humphreys, who is an addition through the transfer portal. So it's a matter of getting them on the same page, and we've yet to see that consistently, if not more, from this offense yet.
And so that's one of the reasons why I talked about Carson Beck a little bit near the beginning of the show, and that if Georgia is going to become that, then him fully stepping into all the stuff we thought that was possible for him before the beginning of the season, that just becomes a very important thing. And John, I still remain very hopeful and optimistic that can happen. I don't know that the average person necessarily realizes this, but look, with all the football that could remain for Georgia here this year, including a month of November that's filled with showcase games, there's a chance that by the end of the season, whatever issue that Carson at times may have dealt with here this year, all of that's just such a distant memory, and nobody, even seemingly remembers it at all. That when you look at both what Beck could still do and the fact that no other quarterback has really stepped up for the most part here this year. Did you watch Will Howard for Ohio State on Saturday? That wasn't great. Garrett Nussmeier had been getting a lot of love, but in the second half, he really faltered against, Texas A&M, seemed to be, really kind of struggling in that moment. Jalen Milroe obviously got the win against Georgia, but it really hasn't been all that special since then. I don't know that Texas fans love Quinn Ewers right now, fairly or not, that the door is still open for Beck to be the best quarterback in college football here this year. And he's going to have the kind of showcase games coming up where if he's at his best, that's the way that he'll be remembered, and that's the way that he will be discussed. So, I do think that, Carson still has a chance in this month of November, starting with a game on Saturday in his hometown, to write his own story and let it be known how he wants to have this, what we believe will be his final season at Georgia, remembered. That Beck's tale here, John, could be far from done.
I hope so. I hope that's the case. And it's almost the dirty word of football because it's potential. The potential is there. And we knew the potential was there at the beginning of the season. It just hasn't been realized. You look at the number of drops, the number of misses, the accuracy in tight windows, and the decision-making that really was defining for Carson last year. There have been moments where you're kind of scratching your head and saying, it just looks a little bit different. But with all that said, the potential for something that's truly special, he's capable of. We've seen it. We saw it last year. And I think that's what's kind of been the head scratcher is that we, whether it's the early drops, maybe throwing him off, but it's in there's times where you're going, this just doesn't look the same offensively. And, part of that is no Ladd, no Brock, no synergy that gets created when, there's a ball that's in a tight window and you trust a guy. I'm not sure we have that right now, a player that has Carson's trust in a way that he's saying, I'm willing to throw this 50-50 ball because it's no longer 50-50. I trust my player to come away with it. What we've seen is a wide variety of players get their numbers called, whether it was Arian or Dylan or Colby when he was still with the team, who've been given those opportunities, and it just hasn't come away with the consistency that would say, all right, you see the rapport between a quarterback and a receiver, they're constantly on the same page. With that said, there's so much football left. There are some really, like you say, marquee games that can be defining. I think the challenge will be, it will take a little bit of a course correction. We haven't seen it through 7-8 weeks of this season that would lend itself to say, we just need to continue on this course. I think what we need is a little course correction. We need some guys to step up, and whether it's a reduction from a rotation of 6 wide receivers that rotate through and 3 tight ends that are additive. And maybe it's let's find those 3-4 guys that we can trust on a consistent basis and lean in on that.
Yeah, see, I think that's really interesting because on the one hand, it certainly seems like, really identifying who your playmakers are. Well, now's the time to do that. But also, if we do take this seriously that, okay, no Bowers, no McConkey, now Beck is supposed to be the offensive weapon, then, John, isn't there also a school of thought of, well, the best of Georgia offensively in light of that reality? Maybe it's like 9 different guys catching the ball, and maybe it's, over the course of the next month, 7 or 8 different guys, finding the end zone, that you'll measure the success of Georgia by how well they spread it around, because there isn't that one person who's going to dominate the way that Brock Bowers would have. You don't have that guy who turns a 50-50 ball into a 75-25 ball because he just always wins that. So therefore, you've got to be a little bit more creative, a little bit more shrewd by how you scheme guys open, how you throw them open, how you do things like that how you spread it out, in other words. Maybe that's a demonstration of what you are offensively, because there isn't that one or, if there were the two or three guys that were going to really just take over, perhaps they would already be doing that. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is. I don't think we have that guy that can take over, but I do think we need the consistency of a quarterback knowing exactly where his receiver is going to be and trusting that he's going to catch the ball. I think there's times where there have been drops early in the game and really throughout the game that you go, well, he just had one or two drops. And it's because we've got 6, 7, 8 guys, including the tight ends, that we're leaning on that, maybe they make one or two mistakes, but it's only because they've been targeted 3 times that game. And if one of those is a drop, if one of those is a route that's run incorrectly, then we're going, geez, Carson, why do we end up in big games with 3 or 4 turnovers, and that you look statistically and we're not getting the yardage that you think we should on some of these plays? So I think, maybe it's not the 1 or 2 guys like a Ladd or a Brock that goes head and shoulders above, but if we can identify the 3 or 4 guys that we can consistently say, we know you're going to run the right route and you're going to catch it if it's put in the right spot. I don't know that we have that yet. So I think there's been games where we've tried to highlight guys like Arian, who we know he's super fast and has the speed. The question is whether or not, he can be that wide receiver. And, whether it was the screen pass that looked like it could have been on him, where he's running a route and Carson's trying to hit him, and it ends up in an interception, or there's times where, it's a deep ball that kind of goes through his hands. I think we need guys to step up more than what we've seen. So I think it would be almost healthier if we had 3 or 4. It doesn't have to be a Ladd or Brock type performance, but if we've got 4 guys that we know, if they're going to run the right route, we put the ball on them, they're going to catch it. That seems like a low bar, but I think that's all that really this Georgia offense needs, is that consistency in those 2 categories.
Okay, I want to finish with this, and I don't know what this means necessarily, but it is something that I notice. Georgia-Florida still feels like a rivalry to me in the way that Georgia's other rivalry games sometimes don't. And I'm a big believer in history. People know, obviously, I care about the Georgia-Florida rivalry. We hype it up a lot, and maybe that's one of the reasons why people reach out to me about this so much. But there is already so much talk amongst Georgia fans that I'm observing about Georgia-Florida that doesn't exist around the Georgia-Auburn game anymore, doesn't exist around the Georgia-Georgia Tech game anymore, that the changes that college football has undertaken has, I think, diminished the Deep South's oldest rivalry and clean old-fashioned hate. They just don't feel the same way they used to. But, man, this cocktail party, to me, John, I don't know if you observe the same thing, it still feels like a rivalry. And my definition of rivalry is sort of a game unto itself a little bit, where like this particular Saturday is not just about the next step towards qualifying for the college football playoff or staying in the hunt for the SEC championship. This is about beating Florida for its own sake, for no other reason than you just, as I like to call them, you hate those lousy, stinking Gators. And I do like that. I don't know if it's because the game is played in Jacksonville, people look forward to the travel, if it's because there just is that intense feeling between these 2 fan bases. I don't know what it is, but my observation, and perhaps I'm biased, but my observation is this truly still feels like a rivalry in the way that some of other Georgia's rivalry games just kind of don't anymore. Do you agree with that, and have you noticed the same thing?
I think you just made the case for why the game in Jacksonville sets this game apart. Statistically, you look at, I'm not a stat guy, but you look at the last decade of football of Georgia versus some of their rivals. And Auburn and Florida probably fall in that same category, that Georgia has dominated those rivalries, but yet because of, I think, the unique setting of playing in Jacksonville, that this game feels special. that there's still that air that surrounds this game, different from Georgia-Auburn. We jokingly say that Auburn has become just a basketball school. Well, you tell me, BA, what the statistics say, but I would think the Georgia dominance of that rivalry is very similar to what it has been of the rivalry with Florida, but yet this game still stands set apart, and I think it's because of the setting. I think whether it's the arguments can be made for recruiting and a home and home and all those things for changing it away from Jacksonville. I think because it's in Jacksonville has made this game retain some of that air and aura that makes it special, more so than just the battle on the field. So I like it. I do feel it. You hear the excitement for fans that are heading down to Jacksonville and the traditions that still exist in an era where traditions seem to be going by the wayside. This is one that fans still value, despite the fact that it's been a very lopsided contest as it plays out on the field.
And I'll tell you this briefly, John, then we'll let you get about your day here. I thought that the bye week last week came at a good time for Georgia. You need a little bit of a chance to catch your breath after such an emotional win against Texas. I think getting back to business against a hated rival like Florida, I think that kind of comes at a good time too. Everything about the month of November for Georgia, and for as long as this runs after that, it's all going to be about high energy. So why not go ahead and turn the energy up against a rival, a game that feels like a rivalry while it's being played? I think getting back to football after the bye week by playing a team like Florida, I think that comes at a pretty good time here too to sort of set the right standard for what the energy level needs to be all the way through the run for the rest of the season now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You look at when the bye weeks have come for Georgia, and they've been very timely. So I appreciate the fact that whether it was preparing for Alabama or knowing that you give your best against Texas and you get a little bye week to kind of recover, which Georgia needs. There's some help that still needs to return and hopefully help the overall starting roster for this Georgia team. But you look at this final run and you're able to catch your breath before you're going, all right, we've got to make this push. And it starts with a rival. So it's able to retain your attention and focus, but also say, this is an important stretch of football, and it all starts with Florida. So I think it came at a great time. I think Georgia really, as we all know, there's some important games coming up, and trying to really play and tune up to play at a high level is important. And when you do that against Florida in a special setting, I think that's a great way that you can set the tone for this final chapter of the regular season.
John, it's fun to think about and great to talk about. We appreciate your time with us here today, helping us do just that. Hope you have a great week. We'll look forward to talking to you next week about what we hope is a big win in the cocktail party. Then, my gosh, you don't want to look too far ahead here, but after that, at Ole Miss, big home game against Tennessee. Man, we got some gigantic football games looming in the weeks to come.
Yeah, it's going to be a great month of football. I look forward to it, and it all starts with whipping those Gators one more time.
I love it, John. We'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it. Go Dogs.
Yes, sir. Go Dogs indeed.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so Georgia's still a pretty big favorite over Florida. We see about 16 points or so. Is that right? Even after the fact that, Florida's played better as of late. Obviously, DJ Lagway has, seemingly made this a different-looking Florida team. And they've won some games here, including that win 2 weeks ago against Kentucky, which I have to acknowledge was pretty impressive because I did not expect them to win that game, and they won it convincingly. So credit to them for that and setting the stage for a big one that we'll obviously be talking about all week long. Now, as we get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean, boy, something else we talk about not just all week, but every single day, really, right? The love we have for Royal Caribbean cruise vacations and all the fun there. And I'm telling you right now, Royal Caribbean's got so many great things going on here for late 2025, or I should say late 2024 and rolling into 2025. Your chance to be on board a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. You're going to be talking all the time about Utopia of the Seas. I love that. Part of the reason why I talk about Utopia so much is because it sails out of Port Canaveral. If you've never done this before, and there's a great number of ports that you can kind of sail out of. And for me, Port Canaveral, which is just sort of down the road from Orlando, probably my favorite just because it's the easiest to get to. I like to drive. It's an easy drive, not hard at all. But keep in mind this, that's not the only great, Royal Caribbean cruise vacation you can be a part of. Out of the Port of Miami, for instance, Icon of the Seas. That's the other, brand new, gorgeous ship that just started sailing in January. That's a wonderful cruise vacation opportunity for you, too. And there's, coming soon, all kinds of big new things being unveiled. Star of the Seas, eventually. That'll be the newest Royal Caribbean cruise ship. That's coming up, in the next, year or so. But you've also got great new destinations showing up. The Royal Beach Club there in Bahamas and Nassau and Paradise Island. That's going to be a lot of fun. A brand new Perfect Day coming to Mexico. And there's just so many great things going on with the Royal Caribbean. That's why you got to stay up to date on all that's happening. Our Jessica Slater can do that for you. Give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. So we had something very interesting happening on Saturday. Now, I'll be honest with you. I did not get a chance to watch a lot of this game. We had a great night Saturday night with our Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame induction ceremony. So happy to welcome in guys like Leonard Pope and Thomas Davis and David Green and Hudson Mason. A lot of former Dogs, among others, that went into the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame. A lot of our previous inductees were also back on hand, too. Saw Charlie Ward, saw just a great collection of some of the best players ever in the state of Georgia. So fun, special night, and that was a great thing to be a part of, but it did prevent me from getting to watch a lot of football on Saturday, which I did miss. The point is, though, while I was kind of doing the induction ceremony and being a part of that, we had a very significant result unfold in the SEC. Texas A&M used a big-time second half to come back and beat LSU. This is sort of all LSU in the first half, all Aggies in the second half. Sometimes we see this in college football, of course. And, boy, it's amazing how, the takes kind of change a bit as this is unfolding. In the first half, it's all about Garrett Nussmeier and the fact that Nussmeier, had the look of maybe the best quarterback in the SEC. Well, he did not play like that in the second half. It was Marcel Reed stepping in for Connor Wegman who had the big moments there for the Aggies. And all of a sudden now this team wins again, and they got a really clear path now to be undefeated in conference and 10-1 playing Texas to conclude this season. And we talked on Friday's show about the fact that, even after beating Texas, numerically, Georgia's not expected, at least mathematically, to be, one of the favorites to make the SEC championship. They still have the best odds to win the national championship, and I believe they have the best gambling odds to win the SEC, but they don't have the best odds to make the SEC championship because, frankly, Georgia plays a much more difficult schedule than some of these teams do. It was kind of baked into the evaluation of A&M before the season began. Their win total to start the year was 8.5, so they were kind of already thought to be one of the more, kind of upper third, type, SEC teams, had a chance to have a good season. But Mike Elko, to his credit, has done a lot to maximize that opportunity. Shaking off the Week 1 loss to Notre Dame, which, other than the obviously bad game against Northern Illinois, Notre Dame has looked pretty good thus far this year. And taking care of business in the SEC after that. And after the game, Elko, who, if we're being honest, is probably not all that famous in comparison to a lot of other SEC coaches, including the guy he faced on Saturday, Brian Kelly. But perhaps now Elko is really introducing himself to his own fans at Texas A&M and the rest of the league too. Very volatile comment from him after the game, saying of his team, he says, "We are a real program. This is not fake. It's not a politician running this program, talking fast and BSing everybody." Now, there's been some debate about what Elko was referencing by saying that. Most people think he was talking about his predecessor at Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher, which certainly seemed to fit. There's also some thought here that he could be referencing his former boss briefly at Notre Dame, Brian Kelly, and the fact that Elko only stays with Kelly for a year, moves on after that to come to Texas A&M as its defensive coordinator, that maybe Elko is not happy with Brian Kelly. As of yet, I don't think it's been confirmed one way or another about who he's actually referencing here. It almost seems like the shoe fits for either Kelly or Jimbo. My assumption, though, is that he's probably talking about Jimbo Fisher. He's probably talking about Jimbo and kind of the issues at Texas A&M prior to his arrival. And if that's what he wants to say, I think that Elko's probably earned the right to say that. There's a lot of football left. There's no doubt the vibe around College Station just feels completely different now. And it could very well be because the fact that A&M is racking up these wins against, the SEC, the teams that they're playing, even if their schedule's obviously a lot easier than some, SEC schedules, are, that clearly Texas A&M is in a relevant conversation in this league now in a way that it has not been certainly any time since Johnny Manziel was here. Probably that's kind of what Texas A&M is doing here at the moment. Elko deserves a lot of credit for that, but also some very volatile comments at the end of that game, which I think a lot of people are going to be assumed was sort of a backhanded swipe at Jimbo Fisher. Kaylee Manziel says it's the fast-talking version of this that gives that away. Jimbo was certainly a fast-talking guy, perhaps more so than Brian Kelly, who, since coming to LSU, is trying to work on his southern drawl, speaking a little slower, saying words like family and things like that. So perhaps Brian Kelly not talking quite as fast now as he would have in the past. Staying in the Lone Star State for a moment, Texas does win at Vanderbilt on Saturday, but closer than experts thought. At least the final margin of this made it appear closer. And I think there's something kind of interesting going on with Texas here at the moment, and it's just sort of worth noticing, worth filing away. That for all the talk that they've gotten, at one point in time, number one in the country, big-time hype, look at what has happened for them in SEC play here thus far. At least by final margin, a close game against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt does score late to cut into that lead, but, the appearance here is this is sort of a close win for Texas at Vanderbilt. Now, undoubtedly, this is an improved Vanderbilt team. That's been well documented, and credit to them for playing well again. But also for Texas, you had been told this over and over and over again of, hey, you got to go play dangerous Vanderbilt. You got to go, play this dangerous opponent. It's a little bit like what Notre Dame was being told about playing Navy this weekend. What did Notre Dame do? Completely shut down Navy. Completely rendered the naval offense. Just completely negated it and got a blowout win against Navy. Really answering that challenge. By comparison, Texas did not really do that against a ranked Vanderbilt team on Saturday. So you add that to the loss against Georgia and the fact that Georgia was up 23-0 at the half. And then before that, you've got the other SEC game against Mississippi State, which, listen, Georgia didn't have its best game against Mississippi State either. We'll acknowledge that. But, Texas had some kind of long-lasting struggles against Mississippi State. So you've really got 3 games in the SEC thus far for Texas. Texas has not really met expectations in any of those games as of yet. Now, perhaps that means nothing, but it is worth filing away. For a Texas team that at one point in time had all the hype around it, was kind of being treated as the best team in the SEC. Let's watch what happens with Texas here. It's one thing to go on the road and win at Michigan, a team that we're frankly not that impressed by. But is there a moment in which Texas can actually impress against an SEC foe and send sort of a statement win in the SEC? We're kind of getting deep into this year here. Texas hasn't really done that yet. Makes you wonder if there are more losses to come for the Longhorns. At least worth filing away. Kind of 0 for 3 in SEC play in terms of impressive efforts and really kind of having a flex performance. They haven't really had that yet. We'll see if they do get that eventually. And then finally, speaking of sluggish performances, Ohio State also has one of those against Nebraska. And I'm telling you right now, this is another game I didn't get to see a lot of just because we were going to Atlanta for the Hall of Fame event. But, there was a stretch in this game where it sort of seemed like Ohio State might lose. And I'm telling you right now, on the list of just absolute disasters, this would have been a huge disaster. For an Ohio State team that allegedly was a $20 million roster, the best team that money can buy, Urban Meyer and guys like that have kind of praised this as the best college ball roster in the last 10 years, whatever nonsense has been spewed about that. To have 2 losses prior to Halloween would have been a total disaster for a team that had gotten the hype that Ohio State had gotten all throughout the offseason. There's no doubt that Ohio State was the offseason national champions. You know that. We all know that. We heard that so much. To think that this team has already lost to Oregon, teetering against a program like Nebraska, which is, probably averages grids. I think that kind of speaks to how wide open this race is right now. And we've all kind of paid attention to Georgia's, issues, and certainly people can kind of point out UGA's imperfections. But it's important to understand you're comparing Georgia to the rest of college football. You're not comparing Georgia to 2021 UGA or the 2022 undefeated national champions, the Go for 2 and 22 team. You're comparing it to its competition here right now. And frankly, there is nobody out there that's playing any better than Georgia at the moment. Ohio State, the latest example of that from Saturday. And we briefly talked about this last week. Ohio State suffered a debilitating injury with its top offensive tackles. That kind of remakes an offensive line that was already not really a strength for the Buckeyes. And that could really be also an issue to monitor going forward here. Ohio State kind of struggles to get past Nebraska. They got Penn State coming up on Saturday. Could get very, very interesting in that Big Ten race here. But for now, we'll make that cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to give you a big shout out here to a really fun contest that we're doing around DawgNation. You're going to love that. I'll tell you about that here coming up in a moment. But prior to that, let me also give a shout out to our friends at Cercheros. The cocktail party, one of the best days of the year for Georgia fans. And if you're getting ready to enjoy your own kind of cocktail party at home, catering with our friends from Cercheros, always a great choice for that. If you got a crowd of 10 or more people at your tailgate or your watch party or anything like that, the delicious food from Cercheros needs to be your choice for how to feed all those folks. And plus, Cercheros got several convenient locations that offer online ordering. You can pick up there. You can, in some cases, have it delivered to you as well to get that delicious food ready to go. The fresh mix that makes Cercheros famous, you can have that with made-to-order bowls, burritos, quesadillas, nachos, tacos, and so much more. And, of course, stop in store and enjoy some of the friendly Tex-Mex every day. You got 25 toppings to choose from to make every single item delicious. It's a Georgia-grown company for sure. Cercheros with 30 locations all throughout the state and growing throughout the rest of the Southeast here too. So it's a company that keeps opening more and more locations because people love the fresh mix that Cercheros is famous for, and you'll love it too. So please check them out online, Cercheros.com for more on that. That is Cercheros.com for more on that. Okay, so to close things out here today, one of the things that I love doing around here is when we get a chance to have a great contest. I just think those are so much fun. I love to celebrate with the winners. We're always happy to be able to do that. And we've got a great contest that we're going to announce today. It starts today. This is such a fun thing. I am so glad they let me do stuff like this. I just think this is great. We're going to do an ultimate beach giveaway right now with our friends from Daytona Beach. I've told you before, I love Daytona Beach. Gone there my whole life. Well, guess what? We're going to offer somebody a chance here to have a 2-night stay at the Hilton Daytona Beach Oceanfront Resort. Very famous resort. Been a big part of the scene there in Daytona for a long time. Awesome hotel. Somebody's going to win a 2-night stay at the Hilton Daytona Beach Oceanfront Resort plus $400 towards the ultimate beach vacation. All you need to do is provide an email address in order to be entered into the sweepstakes, which starts today, runs all the way through November 10th, and then we're going to notify the winner the following week. So please do this. Go to DawgNation.com/contest for more information on this, and you can submit your email and be registered for your chance to win. It's DawgNation.com/contest for more on that. An awesome beach vacation, the ultimate Daytona Beach giveaway here. DawgNation.com/contest. Register for your chance to win today. So I told you we're already getting a lot of love here for the cocktail party. Georgia fans fired up about that. Eddie's fired up about it. The Billy Napier water bottle that he could not open, that's fired up about that too. We are ready to go for all of this, and our golden shoes reflect that here today. In fact, let's show you the first one on the screen. How about Dina Pruitt already in Jekyll Island, writing a little message in the sand, go Dogs, beat Florida. Let me tell you right now, this is as cocktail party as it gets. Being in Jekyll Island on the weekend prior to the game, rolling all the way into next Saturday with beat Florida on your mind, that's why I love Georgia fans, man. We have as much fun as anybody ever could, and Dina's already having plenty of fun out there for the cocktail party. I love to see that. Another golden shoe going out here to Hunter Jones, who's also writing in to say good morning, get that coffee going, get your minds right. It's Florida week. Hashtag FTMF. Some of y'all know that one. Hashtag go Dogs. Hashtag beat those lousy, stinking Gators. And you better believe we're all about that. Hunter, great stuff. Game face already on, and I'm so glad to know but your mind is right and you're ready for all of that. I really, really appreciate that. That is great stuff from our buddy Hunter. Getting the week started on the right note. And then finally, another golden shoe going out today to our buddy Robin, who says it's finally Georgia-Florida week and it's time to head down to Everbank and hashtag skin the Gators. He gives you all kinds of hashtags. Go Dogs, be Florida, Gator hater. And then he's got the world's largest outdoor cocktail party ready to go. Well done with him on the AI-assisted graphic there, too. We're going to skin the Gators. You get the Gator skin luggage, the Gator skin boots, all on board that big jet plane flying down to Jacksonville. Hey, listen, hope you're all getting ready for a great cocktail party week. Thanks for letting us be a part of it with you. We'll also remind you that the Gator Hater Updater is keeping on climbing here, too. How about 1,451 days? That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. And we think that number is going to keep on going. In fact, on Saturday, that's what we're playing for. The honor and the integrity of the Gator Hater Updater. Man, it's going to be a great week. We're glad to have you with us. And we'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews on that. Okay, so we're going to get your comments. Probably will not go just the longest ever today. We have had several long ones. We'll probably do a long one maybe tomorrow, maybe, but we'll do a good number here for a minute. Let me pop over to Facebook. Let me start with them. Always glad to have the Facebook folks as a part of this. James Crump says, I say we beat Ole Miss 38-17 and Tennessee 27-13. He says the Tennessee defense is going to travel, and they're better than last season. Let me tell you, if Georgia beats Ole Miss 38-17 and Tennessee 27-13, I'm going to be the happiest dude in the world. That is a very, very hopeful appraisal of the situation. I certainly hope you're right. Ken Holcomb, I thought about you yesterday because my son was playing baseball like way up in the mountains. And somebody said something about the Cartecate River, which you always shout out the Cartecate River every time you're, or at least very frequently you shout that out. So I thought about you yesterday. Somebody said that. But he says, I wish Ohio State had lost that game. For the last 60 years, I've been a college football fan. They've gotten preferential poll treatment. I despise them more than Florida. Well, since Spurrier left Florida, they have the worst fans out there, or as he says, the worst fans out there. I understand where you're coming from, and I would certainly will love for them to have lost 2 on Saturday. I think that's well said. What else? Keith Fold says we used to stay on St. Simons or Jekyll Island for the Georgia-Florida weekend. What a blast. Missed those days. Yeah, man, some of that stuff's just some of the best stuff. So much fun. So much fun. How about this from Winfred Steinspring, who says he was barking in a bar last night in the St. John's area, right near the St. John's River. That's awesome, man. That's great. Obviously, the great, country group Alabama, spending your dollar barking and hollering. You typically associate that with Alabama and Tennessee fans, but in this particular case, living out that song down there for the cocktail party. I like that. I like that indeed. Travis McCullough likes that Cercheros in Augusta. I love to hear that. Oh, yeah, Rob Phillips also says in terms of getting the offense going against Florida that the homecoming for Trevor Etienne is going to be big on that. Rob, you could be very well right about that. Absolutely. You could be quite right on that. Sam Burke says, I hope this team is rounding the corner and at a good time and getting healthy at the right time. Well, certainly an example of that's perhaps Mikael Williams, who certainly I think was way healthier against Texas than he's been at any point in time this season. I think that's right. Lance D. also says, speaking of pass rush, that DJ Lagway hasn't been chased by anyone close to the talent level of Jalen Walker. Yeah, I mean, I think that for Lagway, it's a major step up in competition against Georgia this week compared to what he's been doing. I think you're right about that. Aaron Dixon also mentioned, somebody brought this up, Anthony Richardson. Like, you talk about an amazing contrast. Like, the love that, like, Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey got this weekend, as we've said, tells you everything you need to know about the former Georgia players in the NFL. Conversely, the fact that the kind of centerpiece draft pick from Florida in recent seasons, Anthony Richardson, AR-15 pulled himself out of the NFL game on Sunday because he was tired. Like, that's That's awful. Like, that's so bad. Oh, my gosh, that's so bad. It's almost as bad as what Tyreek Stevenson did. Which, by the way, he didn't learn that behavior at Georgia. He learned that at Miami. Wait, John McAleer, is it not barking and hollering? Is that not right? Do I have that lyric wrong? I don't think I have that lyric wrong, do I? I very well could. Let's see what else. Bro Baggins, okay. Give us a second there on that. It's supposed to be live today. Give us a second on that, and then we'll figure it out. So if it's not live right now, it should be live here coming out. Foster Moss asking about Eddie. So yeah, we got an issue here. We're not getting this stuff on the screen as well as we possibly could. So let's see if we can do this. Eddie is here. The problem is I got this plugged in thing for this Gator hater sign, and it's like, is that better? It feels like in our studio, it's like it becomes a little harder to see Eddie than it used to. I'm also banging the microphone really bad today. Yeah, we'll work on that. We'll get Eddie a little bit more prominent placement, but I think that's part of the issue is I don't have Eddie as prominently placed. But there he is. He's here. But thank you for asking. Scott Pete says he sees him. Frank Patterson says that for the last 2 weeks, Bequavius, as he calls him, a throwback to the old Staquavius days, says he's been hearing about how bad he is and he isn't a first-round pick anymore. And, by the way, he's playing Florida this week, a game he takes very serious. I agree with you on that, Frank. I think this is a great opponent for Carson on Saturday. I do. A great opponent for him, for sure. John McAleer says he's talking about making out in his car with a girl. But that doesn't make any sense because it doesn't cost any money to be parked in a hold on. That doesn't make any sense to me. But maybe you're right. Maybe I just have that one wrong. I mean, that wouldn't be the first lyric I've gotten wrong. But spending your dollar parked in a like you can park in a hollow for free, can't you? That doesn't make any sense. But I think you're probably right. Scott P, by the way, is going to be back in Gainesville. That's the other, not God's country, Gainesville, Georgia, where only great Americans, true patriots, are born. But down in Gainesville, Florida, wearing red and black. Indeed, I love that. So John McAleer may have taught me something today that I did not know. He may have taught me something that I did not know. Still question the veracity of the claim, but I believe he may have taught me something I did not know. DT says when he was barking at the SO Club, famous place in Clemson, outside the stadium, he says, I wasn't sure I was getting out alive. Yeah. DT, that's awesome. Yard Dog says, does Eddie have his own Twitter account similar to Saban's Coke bottle? So somebody did make an Eddie account one time. I don't have any tie to it. So if it's putting out, questionable content, I can't say that one way or another. But somebody did do that, a little bit like the Coke bottle thing, and indeed that was the case. Back at a time in which the parody accounts were kind of a big deal. But yeah, somebody did do that. By the way, Savannah Bryan pointing out something. I read this. The Georgia has not beaten Florida 4 years in a row since the early 80s. Like, these seniors would have their chance to be the first to go 4-0. I did read that. That's crazy. Crazy. Rambo says, despite his decommitment, I just can't believe Wiley is coming to Georgia. Says, I'd love to have him, but not enough evidence there. Well, to use a line that's been used before, the absence of evidence in this case is not the evidence of absence, because Wiley plays his cards very close to the vest. So, like, he's not tipping his hand really about anything. However, you may not be wrong that he's not, to use double negative, you may not be wrong that he's not coming to Georgia. He may not come to Georgia. Circumstantially, if you decommit from Florida State after visiting Texas A&M, it certainly seems like Texas A&M has entered the picture here. And this is probably going to be, no matter what is said, kind of a highest bidder type situation, probably is. But there's not a lot of tipping of the hand here because the Wiley camp is just not very vocal. They're quite content to be pretty quiet. They just don't have a lot of like fanfare. That's why the original commitment to Florida State was so surprising, and the fact that I don't think that CJ had really told anybody what he was planning on doing that day. So there may not be a lot of accurate online predictions about CJ because I don't think a lot of people, are all that familiar with his thinking necessarily. Yard Dog mentioning Luke Nickel, the quarterback. Yeah, that's a name that Jeff mentioned on the show on Friday. That's a guy that I really like as a quarterback. I really do. I tell you who's had a great season, too. We've talked about this before. Even Barbour's had a great season for them. I mean, really, Barbour is actually having a more productive high school season, I believe, than C.J. Wiley is. I believe that Barbour may be their leading receiver. But Luke Nickel's a very good quarterback. Very good quarterback. Let's see what else. Scott Harris says he's had way too many cocktails in Jacksonville, too many brain cells gone. That's fun. Tom asking about what do you think we're telling C.J. Wiley and other wide receivers about our quarterback room for next year? Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think Georgia knows. Georgia, I think, is committed to having an open competition. It's an open competition in which Beck emerged, and I believe it'll be an open competition for next year. And we would assume it's going to include Gunnar Stockton and Ryan Puglisi and Jaden Rashada. It could include another transfer. But it's going to be an open competition. It is. I would favor Gunnar Stockton in that competition, but it's going to be a competition nonetheless. Laura Rain says she always wants Ohio State to lose. Somebody mentioned earlier that he wishes that Ohio State would have lost. Laura says that's every week for me, and I think a lot of fans probably agree with you on that. What else? Back on YouTube for a moment. Organized Chaos says that, by the way, I feel like we hadn't seen Organized in a while. This was a regular commenter, I think, for us years ago. I haven't seen him as much. Yeah, so John McAleer has taught me something I did not know. It spent my dollar, parked in a holler. I still say, he's clearly right, but I still say, because I did a quick Google search and it did not show up. So that means it's probably not correct. Probably not what I thought it was. Not the first time I've gotten a lyric wrong. I still don't think that makes full contextual sense because parked in a holler does not conceivably cost any money, but I did learn something new today. Jonathan Aaron says, would you rather have Beck go for $350 or Trevor go for $200? Well, if you want to talk about, what would likely contribute more to a victory, the 200-yard rusher would probably go farther towards guaranteeing a victory, I guess. Let's see what else. Keith Ritchie asking about how Ryan Puglisi factors into the competition involving Stockton and Rashada. I would say that Puglisi factors into it pretty well. We know what kind of talent Puglisi. You can look at that and see obviously tremendous arm talent. So I think he's going to be a big factor in that discussion. I do. Aaron Dixon says, I'm excited to see what the defense does this week. Aaron, I think that's an underrated storyline. I do, because, we saw the Georgia defense look like the Georgia defense against Texas. To have 2 weeks in a row of that level of defensive performance, that'd be a big deal. And, keep in mind, this was one of the real hallmark moments for the 2021 Georgia defense, the way in which they just absolutely slaughtered Florida right before the half. That was a major statement for the Georgia defense. To have another week of Georgia defense looking like the Georgia defense, that would be a big deal. I think you're right about that. Baggins and Friends says, the dollar in the Alabama song is for the whiskey. That makes sense. Still sort of feel like my lyric works better. But like I said before, I learned something new today. I learned something new. Spencer Clark says that Beck needs more help in the tight end play. I would agree with that. I mean, they're clearly trying to get Lawson Lucky involved. I know that David Pollack said some pretty provocative things about, Oscar Delp. We may examine that at some point in time this week if we have an opportunity to. BK says that the Florida game could be dangerous because it's a look-ahead spot. So it's kind of funny. I don't have a ton of memories of the 2022 Georgia-Florida game. I don't have a ton of memories of that. But that's a pretty important game to revisit because we knew when Georgia was playing Florida how big the Tennessee game was going to be. Tennessee had already beaten Alabama. We knew how big that was going to be. So in 2022, as I said before, I don't really remember this game very much. I don't know why I don't remember it very much, but I don't. Georgia beat Florida 42-20 in 2022. So I don't remember if that was covering the spread. I just don't remember this game. I need to go back and investigate that. But you won by 22. And so even if that's not covering the spread, I think most of us would take, a 22-point win against Florida in most years, even a bad Florida team. So ahead of the biggest game for Georgia against Tennessee, there was not a ton of look ahead right there. 42-20 would suggest that there wasn't. And so with Ole Miss and Tennessee looming, because here's the issue. It's not just, you're looking ahead to a big game. You know you're going to be facing very specific offenses. Lane Kiffin gives you a lot to think about with his offense. Josh Heupel gives you a lot to think about with his offense, especially Heupel. His offense, I would say, is, it's been kind of compared almost like the sort of one-off preparation, like it's a triple option or something like that. We've talked about that ourselves here a few times on the show. That it's just one of those special, hey, you don't see this a ton. The receivers spread out as wide as he spreads them out. The speed with which they probably play faster than anybody, oftentimes. So it's not just looking ahead to a big game. It's the very specific kind of offensive mastermind type guys that you're doing battle with, that you would have some concern that, you can't look past Florida with that coming. But the game against Florida in 2022 would suggest that Georgia didn't really do that day. And that Tennessee game was the following week, and it was a gigantic game, the team that came in number one in the country. By the way, great job by Bulldog14, who says that the spread that day was 23.5. So Georgia did not cover, right? Did not cover, but right there at the spread. So great job on the quick pull on that. And so kind of right there at the number. Right there at the number. Thank you for that. Yard Dog says, I wouldn't mind going after the Mississippi State quarterback. Talent on a not very good team. It would be kind of funny if the media sort of lost their mind about, getting pushed by Kirby or whatever that was that happened. If he ended up playing for Georgia, I'm not in any way suggesting that's a possibility. I'm just saying it would be a very interesting addendum to, pearl clutching media freakout. That'd be great. Frank says, what's the difference between a Gatorade and a Bulldog Punch? I'm not sure. I don't know. Is that a punchline that can be given on the air? I'm not sure. Richard D is asking about an area in which Georgia can exploit against Florida. We'll certainly look forward to talking about that a lot in the week to come, Richard. That's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be looking forward to doing a lot of that for sure. All right, let's get some final comments. We're going to get ready to get out of here. James Richards pointing out that Florida's always doing something comical, like having two defensive linemen or offensive linemen blocking each other. Yeah, there's always something great like that. Always something great like that. John McAleer says the 2022 game wasn't even as close as the final margin suggested it was. So, perhaps that's an example that when Georgia really had a chance to look past Florida, a not good, Gators team, with Georgia having, one of its biggest games in a while, Tennessee looming. They did not do it that day. Do you right? Genetics having some fun in here. Let me go to Facebook, and then we're getting ready to go. Winfred Steinspring says every game is big, especially in the SEC. Kirby has said it himself. That's right. He loves saying humility is just always, a week away, or as he said 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks away. So, he definitely has the right mindset for all of that. Yeah, Philip Wells, looking forward to the next few weeks. Should be a lot of fun. Kyle and Susan Richter asked about the other quarterback. Yeah, we talked to Jeff about this on Friday. He's from Hawaii, committed to Cal. His name is hard for me to pronounce. Relatively highly rated, quarterback. It also seems like, Oregon may be a factor for him a little bit too. There are other teams in the mix here, but that's the name we've heard here so far. I still suspect, especially if we do get the expanded rosters, that Georgia will go after maybe an additional quarterback in addition to the guy who's committed to Cal and out of the state of Hawaii. I took like 4 cracks at his name on Friday and finally got it right on, I believe, the 4th of those. But, yeah, a Cal commit from the state of Hawaii. That's who Georgia offered the other day. It's not obvious how much deeper the relationship is than just that for now, though. All right, anything else before we go? Ken Holcomb says, next time up there to the Cartacay River, come up there and wet a hook together. That sounds good. A little fishing on the river sounds great, Ken. That sounds like a great time for sure. Craig Jones says, shout out to my new grandson born on Saturday. 2 weeks early. He knew it was an off week. He's a bulldog. Rory Emmett Felkin is the name. Boy, what a beautiful name and what a great story. And always great to spend a bye week welcoming in a new member to the family and getting him ready for a big stretch run here coming up. Man, that is awesome stuff, Craig. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Awesome. Let us see what else. James Crump's got Georgia 45-17 over Florida. So James is in here spitting out scores left and right today. I love that. I love that for sure. What else before we go? Anything else? Let me go back over to DawgNation.com one more time. Yeah, DT likes to see that stadium emptying out in Jacksonville. It's a beautiful sight, right? You got the full Georgia side, the Florida side slowly, then suddenly just completely trickling out, becoming empty seats. It is a beautiful sight, and it's one we hope to see again on Saturday. What a great week it's going to be, man. I'm excited about all of that. Cocktail party week. Eddie's ready to go. He's excited, ready for a great week. All the props, all of the stuff coming out in full effect here this week. Can't wait for it. Y'all have a great day, and then we will see you all back here tomorrow. Check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised, including getting that air conditioning unit back to factory fresh specs, heating system ready to go for the winter, plumbing emergencies. They cover all of that for you. So please find them all. I've hit the microphone like 50 times today. Too much flailing around with the hands, I guess. Anyway, we got to go for now. rsandrews.com online. Check them out today. And we'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then.